Hello everyone and welcome to another video on the MUN training series. In this video, we're going to talk to you about voting. What are the different types of voting that happens in a model United Nations and how does it go on and everything that you need to know about voting. My name is Kevin and I've been training students in different oratory activities and personality development for over the past 10 years. So let's get into it. So voting in a model UN is required for almost every activity that gets carried out, whether it's a particular motion or whether it's a draft resolution or anything that needs to happen for committee room to move forward happens via voting. Why? Because every activity happens through a democratic consensus of every single delegate in the room. So you have two different types of voting that are present so that the entire MUN flows smoothly. Now, the first type of voting that we're going to talk to you about is procedural voting. Procedural voting happens on all matters of structure and organization. For example, the time when a procedural vote is used most is when a particular motion is raised. As soon as a motion is raised and the chairperson says, delegates, are there any points of motion on the floor, and a particular motion is raised, the chair will ask, are there any seconds to this motion? Are there any oppositions to this motion? Of course, if there are seconds and no oppositions, the motion directly passes. And if there are seconds and oppositions, that's when now the committee needs to understand whether that motion should be passed or fail. And for that, you use a procedural vote. And for a procedural vote, you need a simple majority for this, for any motion to pass via a procedural vote. A simple majority is simply the 50% of the committee room plus one vote. Okay. Kindly note, delegates, especially the new ones, that you cannot abstain or choose not to vote in a procedural vote. If you choose not to vote or if you are inactive by not raising your placard either for or against, and if that comes to the notice of your executive board, they will maybe warn you once or twice and then they will ask you to leave the committee room or suspend you from the committee for a couple of minutes for being inactive. Then the second type of voting is your substantive voting. Now, substantive voting happens on all documentation processes. Why? Because substantive voting is a much more intense and a much more time consuming and complicated process. So for substantive voting is usually done on all the documents that are going to be happening. It happens when the entire MUN has come to an end and all the GSL speeches are over, all the SSL speeches are over. If we have opened a special speakers list, you have substantive voting that happens to take a call whether the MUN, that particular conference, can be claimed that yes, let's end it, or is there anything left to discuss in that particular conference. The next, like I mentioned, is about different types of documentation that will happen, whether it's a draft resolution, whether it's a bill, whether it's a budget, doesn't matter. You have substantive voting that happens on it. Substantive voting also happens on amendments. And I will tell you more about this when we are talking about amendments. But if more than 50% of any document is amended, that document is tabled. The chairperson will ask you to go back and make a new document. And for substantive voting to pass or fail any particular activity, it requires for a two-third majority. Okay. By the way, I've not mentioned here, but substantive voting is also used to impeach the chair if the chairperson is doing any particular mistake and your entire committee as a whole does not want that chairperson to be your chair. So you can use it for that as well. That being said, substantive voting has 3 rounds. So it's a 3-round procedure. In the first round, you have the options to say yes. That means yes, you're in favor of what is being voted upon. No, that means you're not in favor of what's being voted upon. Yes with rights, that means yes, you're in favor of what's being voted upon, but it is not in the interest of your foreign policy. That means you are going against your foreign policy. No with rights is, of course, that means you're not in favor of what you're voting upon, but you're going against the rights of your foreign policy to say that no. That means probably your foreign policy would have ideally been in favor of or supported that particular activity, what you're voting upon. Next, you have pass. When you say pass, that means you don't want to vote that moment, but you will definitely vote in the future. Okay. So when you say pass, you give away your right to say abstain or say that I don't want to vote. You have to make a vote, either a yes or a no, once you have said a pass. And of course, when you said abstain, that means you don't want to vote. You do not want to interfere in that particular voting process. Whether it's a yes or a no, doesn't matter. You just don't want to vote. Okay. Now, the catch is that if you have said present and voting at the start for during your attendance, then you cannot choose to abstain from voting. You have to vote in that particular substantive voting process. Now, for the second round, all those who had said yes and all those who had said no with rights get 30 seconds to explain to the entire committee room why did they go against their foreign policy and say that yes or that no. Okay, this also helps the uh, delegates who said pass to make a decision now whether they want to be in favor of or against whatever is being voted on. Finally, in the round three is the final vote where they say yes, you have to say yes as a delegate, or you have to say no as a delegate, or you have to abstain from voting on that particular idea that is being voted upon. Kindly note, if you have already casted your vote in the first round, you cannot change your vote now again in the final round. That being said, folks, that's all you need to know about voting, and I'm sure you've got great clarity about how the entire voting process happens during your MUN. If you have any questions, any doubts about it, please feel free to drop it in the comments, or my Instagram and my email address will be somewhere here, so you can drop me an email or a message and I will reach out to you. Even if you need training for Model United Nations sessions and programs, feel free to reach out, and till then, keep money. All the best.